deadly virus emanating from Wuhan, China is sweeping across the globe.
Something is off.
The disease caused by the novel coronavirus has been titled COVID-19.
What we're being told doesn't add
It's so
up.
important in this crisis that we in that people
Congress passes a multi-billion-dollar bill that will bring...
There is no cure and no way to treat this illness. All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
There must be a doctor out there who's questioning this.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm the Vice Chairman of Internal Medicine. The only chance to reduce the risks of hospitalization is early home treatment. We can beat this pandemic.
Patients actually think the virus is untreatable. There's such a focus on the vaccine. Where's the focus on people sick right now? The pressure to suppress any hope of treatment is extraordinary.
Why the single-minded focus on the vaccine? What is that? What is that about?
That's really going to be the goal of investigative reporters to figure this out.
Unprecedented lockdowns, devastating economic damage, huge violations of personal freedom, families separated from their loved ones, all in the name of a medical emergency.
Things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to the entire world.
The hope we have of protecting our communities is to get a needle in every arm.
They call this a business opportunity. We are witnessing the greatest organized crime in history, to the tune of trillions of dollars.
The Bio-Pharmaceutical Complex is using censorship, propaganda, and manipulation to keep people living in fear. But what we need now is courage.
Thank you. That's it. That's what we need now. We need courage. It's precisely what we need. It's what we needed from the very beginning. This pandemic was a pandemic of fear. It was the infectious disease spread from mind to mind to mind, and then from groups to groups to groups. That's what happened. Most of us didn't see this coming. I know I didn't. That is for sure. But you've heard compelling evidence this morning. Compelling. What's occurred is a crime. A crime, and probably the crime of all time in humanity. And you're watching it unfold right now. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm a practicing internist and cardiologist in Dallas, Texas, United States. And I have dedicated my clinical efforts to helping America and the world get through this difficult time, and with saving as many lives and sparing as many hospitalizations as possible. And the group of doctors led by Dr. Corey, myself, Dr. Cole, was small in the United States. We think about 500 doctors carried the entire country through the pandemic. We have 1 million doctors who stayed on the sidelines and told patients that the virus was untreatable. There was no treatment, and to wait until they're sick enough to come in the hospital and then go on the mechanical ventilator. United States, according to statistics, leads the world in COVID deaths, and we're less than 5% of the world's population. Nearly all the deaths occurred in the hospital. Virtually none at home. Virtually none. Amazing. No deaths of homeless people who live outside all the time. What we have witnessed is something none of us will forget. None of us. Former President Trump said, let's not make the cure worse than the disease. And you know what the proposed cure was, is a needle in every arm, every 6 months with no end. And I can tell you, based on my clinical observations and what we've seen in the peer-reviewed literature, the cure is worse than the disease. Taking the vaccine is worse than getting COVID, for sure. COVID has always been a treatable illness. Now, the treatments change and the information evolves over time, but our lessons learned so far on this whole pandemic response is that every condition is treatable, and the focus should always be on the sick person, not on everybody who's well. Think about all the interventions: masking, lockdowns, hand sanitizer, vaccines. They're all for people who are well. Those people aren't sick. If we just focused on the sick people and did everything we could, that's where all the opportunity to save lives were. So in the next pandemic, if there's going to be one, now WHO Director Tedros, Bill Gates, vaccine developer Peter Hotez at Baylor in Houston, and Anthony Fauci, they all say with great enthusiasm, there's going to be another pandemic, and that COVID is just a warm-up for what's really going to happen. Why are they so enthusiastic? Because they have figured out, working as a syndicate that's been well assembled over time, that if a worldwide emergency is declared, and then individual country emergencies are declared, the doors of treasuries open and the money pours into the syndicate. Now, our book, Courage to Face COVID-19, and then I wrote it with John Leake, who's a best-selling author, and he wrote the majority of it. We identify in the book a Bio-Pharmaceutical Complex, a syndicate, a working syndicate that's formed, and it probably took years in its formation. Dr. Martin probably can tell you how it came together. And the members of the syndicate, who are clearly working together, include the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the Wellcome Trust, the Rockefeller Foundation, Gavi, CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, that the Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum formed, Unitaid, all of the regulatory agencies. This is astounding. So your regulatory agency here in Denmark, the MHRA in the UK, the TGA in Australia, SAFRA in South Africa, in the United States, our CDC, NIH, FDA, our State Department. You would be astounded to go through the websites of the major U.S. agencies, the National Security Administration, for example, and realize virtually every one of these agencies has a statement regarding the origins of SARS-CoV-2. Why would government agencies have a statement on their website regarding this virus? The Department of Energy. It turns out they all had a hand in this relatively giant project. What was going on in Wuhan, and probably going on in many biological labs all over the world, is a giant project. The world is in the business of developing biological threats and then developing the answers for them, what are called countermeasures. Countermeasures including therapeutics, monoclonal antibodies, vaccines. So one way to think about it is the entities that hold the next threat to humanity and they hold the answer, they hold a lot of power. Power. We don't hear about ballistic missiles and defense systems anymore. We hear about biological threats. So all of those who are in this business of threat and countermeasure are really juiced up now. That's the reason why they think there's going to be another pandemic. If there is another pandemic, I would predict it's going to be another human-engineered virus. It's not going to be a natural virus. So if we hear about another pandemic, a paramyxovirus, or a version of Marburg virus, or a fungal organism, my first thought would be it's manufactured. Why wouldn't we think that? This has been telegraphed to us. Why wouldn't we think that? The next thing I think we should carefully look at is that to be very, very skeptical of whatever the narrative is. If we are told that a infection is not treatable, we should immediately think it is treatable, like all infections are. And that if it is an infection and people are dying of it, we should treat early. All infections are treated this way. And if it's a fatal infection, we must treat with many drugs together, because we do that for all infections. No single drug is a miracle drug. No single drug will work alone. So I published the first treatment protocol for COVID-19 in the peer-reviewed literature, and I'm fortunate that I had enough publication strength to do it. And the very first thing I said is, not a single drug. No single drug is necessary nor sufficient, but we use about 4 to 6 drugs in combination. Over time, we found ivermectin is powerful, but we can treat COVID without ivermectin. People learned how to treat it all over the world. But what we found out, and what we really outline in the book, as Dr. Corey mentioned for ivermectin, is all forms of treatment were crushed. They were crushed, every form of treatment. Clive Palmer, who's a billionaire in Australia, bought enough hydroxychloroquine for every person in Australia. The Australian authorities seized that stockpile of hydroxychloroquine and they destroyed it. In 2019, before the pandemic, France took hydroxychloroquine from the over-the-counter market and made a prescription. This is serious business. The second largest producer of hydroxychloroquine outside of Taipei, the factory burned down mysteriously. You think there's a war on ivermectin. It started with hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, but it doesn't stop there. Do you know that virtually every manufacturer of a virucidal nasal spray, from forms of iodine to xylitol to the gargles, they were all sued and tied up by the US FDA and Federal Trade Commission. There wasn't going to be a single nasal spray that got out to Americans to help them. It turns out the nasal sprays are way better than vaccines. In fact, they're better than most of the oral drugs. Something simple like a nasal spray and a gargle makes sense, right? The virus is right here. It's replicating in the nose and mouth. Something as simple as that was going to be crushed. It was going to be crushed by this Bio-Pharmaceutical Complex. When I started messaging to America that we could use forms of nasal sprays and gargles as a first-line defense, immediately Medscape and the other email services for doctors sent out a message. It said anti-vax doctors telling patients to use iodine nasal sprays. Patients will swallow the iodine and die. They sent that out to every doctor in America. Every doctor in America. There is a clear plan being played out. The plan is to suppress any hope of treatment at all, and to continue to advance these genetic vaccines every 6 months. Now, very recently, I published the very first peer-reviewed paper proposing that we should start detoxification for people who have taken the vaccines and long COVID. You saw Dr. Cole's slides. These tissues are loaded with this Wuhan spike protein. The spike protein was engineered and it is unnatural. This spike protein is stuck in what's called the pre-fusion phase, engineered with certain changes in amino acids by Pfizer and Moderna. This spike protein appears to be resistant to human enzymes breaking it down. It's stuck in all the tissues. Now, those are patients at autopsy. People walking around who've taken these vaccines almost certainly have spike protein in their tissues. It's not going away. The proposal, based on signals of benefit in the preclinical and the available clinical literature, is to start detoxification by enabling the human body, giving it some aid with orally ingested enzymes, natural enzymes that can assist in this degradation. The first is nattokinase. Nattokinase is derived from the fermentation of soy by a bacteria called Bacillus subtilis natto. The Japanese have been eating natto for its cardiovascular benefits for about 1,000 years. They've had an oral supplement for several decades. They've done randomized trials in carotid atherosclerosis and other diseases where there's atherothrombosis. It is safe. It clearly, is a blood thinner. It's an orally over-the-counter available blood thinner. But the Japanese showed nattokinase reliably degraded the spike protein in intact models and cell lysate models. So nattokinase is first up. Second is bromelain. Bromelain is another family of enzymes derived from the stems of pineapples. Now, bromelain is an FDA-approved drug as a topical agent used in burns to actually degrade the eschar, or the thick proteinaceous cap on wounds. So we know bromelain has medicinal purposes. It's an FDA-approved drug. Well, it's been available as an oral supplement for several decades. Now, the third, again, the principle is single things don't work. I've been working on this clinically, in my practice and in the literature. Single drugs don't work. Everything has to be in combination. The third is a drug that's been tested in prospective randomized trials in people who've taken the vaccine and have long COVID. And they do feel better, and it does reduce inflammatory markers in the bloodstream, and that is curcumin. Curcumin is derived from turmeric. So about 6 to 9 months ago in my practice, in an organized way, we said, listen, let's start trying detoxification and seeing if anybody can get better. Because I'm using every prescription drug I can. I'm treating every syndrome possible. But the spike protein does not seem to be going away. We're not seeing any signs in the literature it's going away. We're seeing sky-high antibodies in response to the spike protein. Pretty soon we're going to be able to measure it directly in plasma. By the way, it's been measured in plasma in papers by Yonker, by Castriuta. It's been measured most recently by Brogan. Ryan Cole cited that paper. A year later, people have circulating spike protein in their bloodstream. It's in their bloodstream for sure. It's in the tissues. So we started doing this and making careful observations. This is what I know so far, that the triple combination of nattokinase, 2,000 units twice a day, bromelain 500 milligrams once a day, and curcumin 500 milligrams twice a day, it's well tolerated. It's way below the safety limits that we have to worry about with these drugs. However, it can promote bleeding. So we have to be cautious with people on blood thinners, of which we can use it, and people who, have easy bruising or nasal oral mucosal bleeding. And people with allergies to any one of the components potentially can't tolerate it as well. But with these caveats in place, we have made the observation that people do improve. It takes time. About 3 to 6 to 9 months of time before some of the characteristic syndromes get better, like the small fiber neuropathy, headache, POTS, posterior orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, this pounding of the heart and blood pressure oscillations, that these fundamentally can get better. So, in a bold move, just like we did with COVID, published the very first paper proposing detoxification to get going on it. And we called it base spike protein detoxification, meaning it's the base. Now, if someone says, well, I really want to use N-acetylcysteine, I said, fine, add it to the base. I really want to use ivermectin some more. Fine. I want to use hydroxychloroquine. Fine. Keep adding it to the base. We're in a multi-drug situation. 5 billion people in the world took these things. A Zogby survey in the United States showed about 15% of people are chronically ill from taking the vaccines and having COVID, and those combined. So this is a proposal for patients with long COVID and those who've taken the vaccine and have some symptomatology. Now, people have asked me, Dr. McCullough, does every person need to do this? I would say no. And I think one of the most important papers I have seen in the last year on COVID-19 vaccines came from Denmark. It came from your country. The first author is Schmeling and colleagues, Schmeling. And he had all the Pfizer data and he had the side effects. Schmeling reported that there were 3 groups of batches of vaccines. The batches are the lots, are the grouping of the produced product that gets put into the vials. The first grouping, just less than a third, 0 side effects. 0. Nothing. Not even a sore arm, by the way. So the first thing when someone says, Dr. McCullough, I took a vaccine, do I need to worry? The first question I ask them is your arm sore? Very important question. And have you had any side effects? The group that had 0 side effects very likely is going to have no side effects, probably because they got a very minimal dose of messenger RNA or some other factor. But it's clearly related to the product, not the patient. The second group, which is just under 2/3, that group had some moderate side effects, okay, but the third group is most worrisome in the Schmeling data. It's 4.2% of doses, and it's through the roof. Myocarditis, blood clots, death. It's very similar to the CDC V-Safe data, where, in 10 million Americans who took the shot, 7.7% report they got so sick they had to go to the hospital or emergency department. It's a small group of people who took the vaccines who are really in trouble. So our challenge is to risk stratify, identify those individuals, and intercept them to see if we can't begin to take some of the tension out of this entire situation now. We are seeing people die at unprecedented rates. We're seeing young people with cardiac arrest, and it's real. The real question is, the next person who dies in Copenhagen today, the question on the table is it due to a vaccine? I'm the senior author on the largest autopsy paper now that's been assembled in the peer-reviewed literature. This is what we found. In people with no prior illness, no antecedent disease, no expected death, when they do die and undergo an autopsy, 73.9% of the time, it's due to the vaccine. The next person who dies, and it's unexpected in this town, it's due to the vaccine until proven otherwise. That paper, when it was published in the Lancet server, it was crushed in less than 24 hours. It was censored. The Bio-Pharmaceutical Complex said, ooh, we can't let that get out. Well, we put it up on the European Commission server. We've been having it shop around at the journals. I gave a lot of press interviews. The typical vaccine paper on the European Commission server gets about 25 to 50 downloads and views because there's so many vaccine papers. Ours is approaching 400,000. The point is, every time the Bio-Pharmaceutical Complex tries to crush me or you, it backfires. Every time. Censorship backfires. The base spike protein detoxification, within 24 hours of it being published and people were messaging out on social media, immediately the censorship started coming in, hot and heavy. And you know what? I was happy. Because that is confirmation we're on the right track. That's confirmation that it works. This Bio-Pharmaceutical Complex, they have all the resources. They have thousands of scientists. They have every bit of funding and knowledge as you can possibly imagine. They have probably figured out how many steps ahead. They probably figured out what would break down the spike protein and to keep a watch for papers on nattokinase and bromelain. Listen, they are running this show. So when they saw that coming, they knew they had to crush it. They figured out, oh, there it goes. There's McCullough, or his team has got this out there. They knew to crush hydroxychloroquine ahead of time. They crushed ivermectin when they saw Dr. Corey, when he testified in the U.S. Senate, and he brought the news that ivermectin is clearly a powerful drug. They said, we have to crush ivermectin. His book is called The War on Ivermectin. It was a war. Anything that really works to help people, this is the game now. Pay attention to this. Pay attention to anything that gets crushing censorship and immediately go to that. Go to it because that's the truth. That's something that's going to help you. It's very, very important. Pay attention to this. Pay attention to anybody who's being censored because they are speaking the truth. Joe Rogan did a great video on this and said, wherever you see censorship, You're seeing an attempt of stripping civil liberties away. This isn't just about making people miserable. Stripping civil liberties away, like your personal autonomy, your right to medical care, your right to treatment, your right to new innovations, that is actually stripping away your life potentially. This is not just about being restricted or having a digital passport. This is potentially about your life and the life of your family members and the people you care about. That's what this is about. In many ways, this is a war. This is a war, and you have to start to behave like we're in a war. If you're going to behave in a war, are you going to get in line to take a vaccine so you can keep your job in the middle of a war? You're going to say, no, I'm going to do the things that I need to do to survive and protect my family. That's what you do in a war. We need to start behaving like we're in a war. This is very important. If we can't pull it together now, we're 3.5 years into this. This has been 3.5 years of misery, of injury, disability, and death. And you're all sitting side by side. You're comfortable. You're okay. I'm here to tell you this next wave of COVID is very mild. It's easily treatable. It's easily managed. That you should not put your life at risk with another vaccine shot. You should not. No job is worth it. How many of you told me, Dr. McCullough, my son or daughter took the shot to keep their job? To keep their job. Really? What job is worth that? I have patients amputated to here. They said, I did it for my job. Listen, we've got movie stars. We've got people who are destroyed. And they're so destroyed, they're so fearful, they can't even come out and say it was the vaccine that did it. Very rarely can someone who's vaccine injured with one of these COVID shots come out and say it was the shot. Very rarely. Those people you should pay attention to. They took the shot, they had something bad happen, and they have the intellectual honesty and compassion and concern for you that they are telling you what happened to them. Those are people who really care. The people who take the shot and stay quiet, well, I took the shot and something happened, but I'm not going to really say if I took the shot or not. That applies to a lot of public figures right now. They're just propagating the misery and the harm. I did a Twitter poll, and I asked the question, why are they doing this? Some of these movie stars have zillions of dollars. Why wouldn't they just come out and tell the truth? You know what the answer was? The answer is they were afraid of losing more. They had already lost so much with their vaccine injury, they were afraid of losing more. So we're back to fear. So there's fear at the start, there's fear every step of the way through, and there's even fear after someone is crippled with one of these vaccines. The fear is the disease. The fear doesn't stop until we have courage. Courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is the ability to overcome fear. Fear is a natural human emotion. Courage is the ability to overcome fear. So all of us, we need to work on our own courage. We need to help others develop courage and support others in having courage, because that is going to be the way that we survive and then ultimately prevail in this time of a great controversy. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you so much for having me. Copenhagen, we love you.
Dr. Peter McCullough.